The wind was dry and hot, filled with the smell of dust and smoke. The refugee camp stood on cracked ground, where nothing green had grown for years. Tents made of plastic sheets and old metal flapped weakly, and the air was quiet, too quiet. Children, with thin arms and hollow eyes, sat in lines, waiting for food that might never come. Their skin was grayish, some blue, some brown, but all their stomachs growled the same. No one cried anymore. They didn't have the energy. Reed, the only human in the camp, stood in the food tent. He had one cracked ceramic bowl in his hand. It was the last serving of protein stooged enough for one. His hands were dirty, sunburnt, and shaking. His own stomach ached from days of giving away more than he kept, but he didn't say anything, didn't complain. Behind him, the alien elder scoffed. "Give it to the strongest, not the weakest." Reed didn't answer. He looked across the room at a small alien girl with bright, tired eyes. Her name was Tlee, the youngest of them all, too weak to stand on her own. Her older sister Zira held her close like a mother would. Zira watched as Reed walked toward them with the bowl. Her sharp ears twitched, her lips slightly parted in disbelief. He knelt, placed the bowl in front of the tiny girl, and offered a small smile. "Eat slowly," he whispered. Twee looked up at him like she didn't understand, but Zira understood. "Everything that was his last meal," she whispered under her breath. Her voice trembled, her mind confused. Why would a human? Other children gathered, staring. A few adults turned away, embarrassed or angry. One elder spat on the ground. Foolish human, no sense of strength or survival. But Reed didn't hear them. He had already stood up and walked out of the tent. His steps were slow, heavy, and then he stumbled, falling to his knees in the dust. Zira ran after him, kneeling beside his body. "You gave it all," she said quietly. Her hand touched his shoulder, warm despite the dry air. Reed smiled faintly. "She needed it more," he said, then closed his eyes. The sun was setting. Turning the camp orange and red, the children finished their food silently, watching the man who had collapsed beside them. None of them had ever seen kindness like that. Later that night, while most were sleeping, Zira crept into the food tent. She searched until she found a few shriveled berries, 2 cracked nuts, and a flask of water. It wasn't much, but it was something. She brought them back to Reed's tent. He was lying on a mat, face pale, lips dry. His chest moved slowly, still breathing. Zira knelt beside him. She lifted his head gently and let a drop of water touch his lips. He stirred, opening his eyes halfway. "You shouldn't." He whispered. "Hush," she said. "You gave enough." She placed the berries in his hand. He smiled again, but this time there were tears in his eyes. No one had done this for him before, not in this camp, not in years. Outside, children watched. From the shadows, their eyes glowing softly in the dim camp lights. Something had changed. Zira looked at them, then back at the human man lying in front of her. He was not strong, not fast, not even from their planet, but he had done what their own leaders would not. The next morning, the camp elder stood before the crowd and laughed. "You see, humans are weak," he said. "They starve themselves for nothing." But Zira stood tall beside Reed, who was now sitting up, drinking slowly from the flask. Her voice rang clear. "Weak. He gave food to your children while you kept yours hidden." The elder's face froze. Murmurs spread across the crowd. Reed looked confused, unsure why they were staring at him now. But Zira stepped forward and pointed at him. "He is no fool," she said. "He is the only one here worthy of being followed." The other children nodded. One by one, they came to sit near Reed's tent, bringing him small gifts: fruit skins, water drops, warm cloth. Zira sat beside him, crossing her arms. "You're not just a human anymore," she said. "You're one of us now." Reed looked around at the tired, hopeful faces. He didn't feel like a leader. but something had begun. The cracked bowl still lay beside the fire pit, empty but clean, a small reminder of what he gave. And what he started. And in that silence, something powerful was growing. Reed woke to the sound of children whispering outside his tent. The light filtering through the old fabric was soft and golden. He could hear feet moving, not in fear or hunger, but something else. Something different. He sat up slowly, his head still light from hunger, and saw the little alien girl, Jira, sitting beside him with her knees pulled up and arms wrapped around them. "You're awake," she said softly, her voice calm, her eyes studying his face like she was trying to understand something much deeper. "They waited for you to wake up." Reed blinked, confused. "Who did?" he asked, and Jira stood without a word and opened the flap of the tent. Outside, nearly 24 alien children stood in a messy circle. Some held broken toys. Others held tiny cloth bundles. All their eyes were locked on him. He stepped out slowly, and the wind caught the edge of his shirt. He looked thinner than before, weaker, but something in their gaze made him stand straighter. One of the kids stepped forward, a boy with one arm and a scar across his cheek. He offered Reed a dried root food. The others followed, placing small gifts on the ground, half a fruit, a wooden carving, even a torn blanket. Reed didn't know what to say, but Jira did. "You gave when no one else would," she said. "They think maybe you're the only one who still cares." An old alien woman hissed nearby. "This is nonsense. He's not even one of us." But her voice was weak, ignored by most. Jira raised her chin proudly and turned to Reed again. "Will you help us? Not just with food, but with everything." Reed looked at her, then at the other children. His throat was dry, but he nodded. And the circle of kids slowly smiled. For some of them, it was the first smile in weeks. That afternoon, Jira led him around the camp, showing him what the adults had ignored. There were broken shelters where the wind got in, water barrels filled with dirt and dead insects, cooking fires made with wet wood that produced more smoke than heat, and most of all sick children no one had cared for. "We tried to tell the elders," Jira whispered. "They said we were too young, too weak to matter." Reed listened carefully, taking notes in a small pad he always kept. He didn't promise magic or miracles, but he asked questions, nodded, and thanked every child who showed him something. By evening, something unexpected happened. A group of the youngest ones were seen cleaning trash from around the water barrels, using old cloth and sticks. 2 older girls helped patch a ripped tent using needle vines. No one had told them to do it, they just started. Reed sat by the fire, chewing on a piece of tough root. Sira sat beside him again, her tail curled around her legs. "You didn't ask for anything," she said quietly. "You just gave." Reed looked at the stars above. "Someone has to," he replied. "And maybe if I keep giving, others will too." The wind picked up again, but this time it didn't feel as cold. Not with all the children slowly gathering near the fire. One by one, they came not for food, but for his words, his presence, for the strange feeling that someone cared again. A boy leaned into his side, eyes closing. A girl wrapped a threadbare blanket over her sister's shoulder. Skira looked at them all, and then at the human who had started something. Without even knowing it, she didn't say it aloud. Not yet, but in her heart, she already believed it. He wasn't just a helper now, he was becoming their leader. A loud thud shook the camp just before sunrise. Tents rippled, dust filled the air, and the children woke with wide eyes. Reed was already moving, his body sore but alert. Jira met him near the center post with panic in her eyes. "They're back," she said, her voice tense. "The scavenger bandits, the ones who steal food and hurt the weak." Reed didn't speak at first. He looked toward the ridge where black smoke curled into the sky. A shape moved their rough transports, fast, armored. Not military, but dangerous enough. The camp had no walls, no real weapons, and no guards brave enough to stand against them. Children huddled together, some crying, some hiding behind tents. Adults whispered and vanished into the shadows, hoping not to be noticed. It was like watching a village turn into ghosts. Reed stood tall and walked straight to the center of the camp, his voice steady but loud. "We don't run," he said. "Not this time." No one answered him, not at first, until Gira stepped forward. "What do we do then?" she asked. He looked around and saw broken crates, bent cooking pans, old oil drums, pieces of sharp metal. He pointed, "We use what we have. Make traps, make noise, make fire, make them afraid to come near." Some older kids looked up, uncertain but curious. "We're not soldiers." One said. Reed nodded. "You don't have to be soldiers, you just have to protect each other." He took an old water tank and rolled it into the open path. Then showed the kids how to coat it with oil. He poured dry powder from ration packs into the oil to make it smoke heavy and thick. Soon others joined in, setting up fire pits, tying ropes, sharpening sticks. Gira worked beside him, fast and focused. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could hide, like the others." Reed lit the first fire, the flames rising high. "Because if no one stands up, then nothing changes." As the sun climbed higher, the bandit trucks reached the edge of the camp. They expected weakness, silence, easy pickings, but what they saw was fire, smoke, and strange traps lining the main road. And standing in front of it all was a human with a broken pipe in one hand and oil on his shirt. Behind him, a wall of children stood with rocks, pans, and makeshift shields. The lead bandit stepped forward, snarling, "You think this scares us?" "Human." Reed didn't flinch. "Try me," he said quietly. The bandit laughed. But then the first smoke bomb hit their front tire, bursting with thick blue smoke. A child had thrown it from behind a barrel, and another fire lit near the second truck. More smoke, more heat. Confusion spread through the attackers like fear through prey. They didn't expect resistance, not from children, not led by a human. Gira threw a rock that hit a bandit's mask. Others followed, the sky filled with noise, screams, shouts. Metal clanging, the bandits pulled back in shock, unsure of what they'd just walked into. One of them yelled, "They're crazy. He's got them trained like warriors." After a few chaotic minutes, the trucks turned around, engines roaring as they sped away, leaving a trail of smoke behind them. The camp stood quiet, smoke still curling in the air, and the children frozen in place. Then one girl laughed, then another. And soon the entire camp was cheering. Reed dropped the broken pipe and sat on a stone. Exhausted Gira knelt beside him, covered in soot but smiling. "You really weren't scared." "I was," he said, breathing hard. "I just didn't let it stop me." That night, the fires burned brighter, not for fear, but for celebration. No one had left the camp. No one had been taken, and for the first time, even the adult aliens looked at the human not with doubt, but with respect. Gira sat beside him once more, her voice softer than usual. "They followed you." Reed looked into the flames. "They followed." "Hope," she shook her head. "No," she said. "They followed you." Asterisk rain began to fall for the first time in months. It came in thin lines, cold and slow. But to the children, it felt like magic. They ran barefoot through the puddles, laughing, arms raised toward the clouds. Some caught drops with their tongues, others danced in silence, as if they were afraid it would stop if they made too much noise. Reed stood under the canopy of a broken tent, watching them with tired eyes. Skira was beside him, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks, her arms crossed but her tail swaying behind her. She glanced up at him and smiled for the first time since she arrived in the camp. "You made them believe." she said. Reed shook his head, water dripping from his chin. I just reminded them they mattered. A loud snap came from the camp's edge. 2 children had tripped over a rotting support beam. One of them screamed, not from pain, but fear. The beam had crushed the corner of their shelter, which now leaned sideways, barely holding together. Reed didn't hesitate. He ran toward the mess and began lifting the beam. His muscles shook, but he didn't stop. Others joined him, children, teens, even a few adults. They worked together, pulling the shelter upright, replacing the poles, patching the sides with stitched cloth and old tools. By midday, 4 tents had been repaired, 6 water barrels cleaned, and 3 new cooking fires lit. Reed organized the work without raising his voice. He taught as he helped how to build stronger frames, how to purify water with charcoal and cloth, how to stretch rations so no child went to sleep hungry. Jira followed him like a shadow, listening to every word, repeating them in her language when the younger ones didn't understand. At one point, she turned to him and said, "Why do you know so much? You're not a soldier, not a leader?" He smiled faintly. "I grew up hungry too, not on this world, but in a place not so different." That night, the air smelled of cooked roots and spice, a real meal shared equally. No pushing, no fighting. Reed sat by the largest fire, his eyes half closed, exhausted but calm. The children formed a wide circle around him, listening as he told them stories not of war or heroes, but of small kindnesses, of stubborn hope, of planting seeds even in dry dirt. Shira sat closest, her head on her knees, her eyes glowing in the firelight. She whispered, "They trust you now more than anyone, even more than their own blood." Reed didn't answer at first. He stared into the flames. "That's a heavy thing to carry, but you carry it well," she said. A sudden gust of wind made the fire flicker, and something changed in the air. A sound, far away, steady and deep, like engines. Jira stood quickly, her ears twitching. Someone's coming. Reed rose to his feet, scanning the dark hills. Beyond the camp, a faint red light blinked in the distance, slow and purposeful. Not bandit stew, organized. Not a rescue, too quiet. He looked down at the children, still warm and sleepy by the fire. He knew whatever came next, the peace would not last, but he also knew something else. They weren't defenseless anymore. They had each other, and they had him. The red lights drew closer with each passing hour. By morning, a heavy silence had settled over the camp. The air felt tighter, like it was holding its breath. Even the children stopped laughing. Reed stood at the highest point of the ridge, his hand shielding his eyes from the rising sun. The transport ship wasn't just passing by, was landing. It came down slowly, its legs crushing stone and dust beneath it. Sleek and metallic. Too clean for bandits, too dark for official relief. Force's symbols on its hull were sharp and unfamiliar. The kind of design made to inspire fear, not trust. Jira climbed up beside him, her chest rising and falling fast. "They're not from here," she said. "That's off-world tech." Reed nodded, his jaw clenched. Mercs, maybe. Or worse, the hatch opened, and out stepped a tall alien figure wrapped in gray armor. Behind him were 6 more, smaller but armed. They moved with discipline, not chaos. The leader scanned the camp, then his gaze landed on Reed. They didn't speak right away, just walked forward like they owned everything in sight. The leader stopped a few feet from Reed, his voice calm and sharp. "We've come for the children." Reed blinked once. "Excuse me, they've been marked for collection." The armored figure said, "Genetic compatibility identified. The syndicate has use for them." Children began to gather behind Reed, some hiding behind Zira, some clinging to each other. The word collection echoed in the air like poison. Reed took one step forward, his tone low but solid. "They're not cargo. They're not property. The alien tilted his head. "You have no authority here. Human, step aside or be removed." Skira moved to stand with Reed, her voice loud and trembling. "We won't go with you, not one of us." The soldiers behind the leader began to raise their weapons, energy humming to life. The camp's elders watched from a distance, silent, afraid to choose sides, but the children, they didn't move. They stood behind Reed and Gyra, eyes wide, fists clenched, ready to follow. Reed didn't back down. "You'll have to go through me," he said, and then, louder, "through us." The leader raised a clawed hand to give the order, but something unexpected happened. The sky cracked with thunder, and another ship descended fast, larger, older, painted in the broken colors of the old Unity Aid Corps, a human vessel, barely flying, but proud. Its comes crackled to life, and a voice roared across the camp. "Step away from those children. This area is under emergency protection by Human Relief Protocol 97. The mercs hesitated, their leader glaring at the sky. The second ship landed, with a rough thud, and out came 3 human peacekeepers in patched gear but heavy armor. Weapons ready, the mercs backed off slowly, not wanting a direct fight. Yara's grip loosened, her heart pounding. Reed exhaled, not in victory, but in exhaustion. "Took them long enough," he muttered, as the mercenaries retreated. One of the peacekeepers walked up to Reed. "We heard about what you did here, organizing the kids, holding off raiders. You're not just a survivor." Reed didn't smile. He just looked back at the children. "I'm what they needed, later." That night, while the peacekeepers checked records and scanned the area for threats, the camp sat under stars once again. Gira leaned against a tree trunk, watching Reed patch up a hole in one of the tents. "They were ready to take us," she said softly, "and you stood between us and them." Reed didn't look up, his hands busy. "Of course I did." Gira paused, then said the words she'd been holding for days. "You're not just helping anymore, you're leading." He finally looked at her, tired but clear. "If that's what it takes to keep them safe, then I'll lead." The night wind passed through the camp like a breath of peace, and for the first time, even the stars seemed to be watching in silence. The days that followed were different. Not quieter, not easier, but different. The camp moved with purpose now. Children woke early to carry water, clean paths, and build stronger shelters. The older ones trained with sticks and slings, and the younger ones drew stories in the dirt, stories where a human stood between them and monsters. And always one. Reed didn't give orders, he asked questions, gave tools, taught skills. The children followed him, not because he demanded it, but because he had already bled for them, already starved for them, already stood alone while others ran. Gira walked with him every morning, carrying a small notebook where she wrote everything he said. One day, she told him, "These words will guide others too." He didn't think of himself as wise, just stubborn, but he didn't argue. With her, one morning, a group of elders came to see him, not with insults or mockery, but with questions. They asked how he calmed the children, how he made them work together, how he turned scraps into tools. Reed sat with them, answered carefully, and didn't judge their fear. He had felt it too by the end of that meeting. Something strange happened. The elders agreed to let the children join the daily council. It was Gira's idea, and Reed supported it fully. Let them speak for themselves, he said. They're not just mouths to feed. They are voices, ideas, futures. That afternoon, the first child stepped forward in front of the council and pointed to a broken purifier. "We can fix that," she said. "We know how." The elders listened. It was the beginning of a new rule, not by bloodlines or tradition, but by trust and proof. Later that week, Scout brought news from a nearby settlement. Disease had broken out. They needed help, medicine, clean water, strong arms. The camp had little to spare, but Reed stood. before them and asked a question that no one had ever asked here. Who's willing to go help strangers? He expected silence, maybe confusion. Instead, hands shot up. Jira raised both of hers and shouted, "We're not just survivors, now we're a people." Reed and the children gathered supplies, loaded old carts, and walked across the dry valley under a burning sky when they reached the sick village. The people there stared in disbelief, children carrying herbs. Humans and aliens working side by side, not demanding payment, not afraid. Jira knelt beside a sick boy and wiped his forehead with cloth soaked in cool tea. She whispered in his language, calming him, feeding him, watching him breathe easier. Beside her, Reed boiled water, measured herbs, taught others how to treat the wounds. By nightfall, the village fire burned bright. Not from fear, but from hope. Strangers had become healers. And a human had led them. When they returned to their own camp days later, they found something waiting for them, a sign carved into stone near the main path. It wasn't big or fancy, just a few words scratched in many hands. "We are the children of the fire, and he is the one who lit it." Reed stared at it for a long time, saying nothing. Jira stood beside him. Her voice quiet. "You didn't ask for this, did you?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but you earned it," she said, and for the first time he didn't deny it. Dust rose high as the sky darkened. A great transport ship landed near the edge of the valley. Its engines low and deep, like thunder in the chest, unlike the others before it. This one bore the flag of the Interplanetary Council, clean white, with a golden arc piece, law and recognition. The entire camp stood still. Even the smallest children sensed the change in the air. Reed stood at the front with Jira beside him, both silent, waiting. This wasn't danger this time, it was something heavier, something final. A tall figure in a navy coat stepped down the ramp. No armor, no weapon, just a clipboard and tired eyes. Her name was Director Amari, and she had come with news. "We received your reports," she said softly, "and the data packets from the peacekeepers you saved." Reed didn't reply right away, his eyes scanning the faces behind her other officials. "Aid workers, scanners, medics, you don't have to stay here anymore," she continued. "We can take the children, the elders, relocate them to safer colonies. Places with food, protection, schools, real homes." There was silence for a long time, the kind that stretches between past and future. Sierra looked at Reed, her voice barely a whisper. "Is that good?" He thought of the cracked bowl, the night he gave it away without a word. Of the smoke from the bandits, the traps made with kitchen scraps. The girl who learned to speak, the boy who built his first fire. The circle of children who no longer feared the night. He nodded slowly. "It's good." The children didn't cheer. They didn't run to the ship. Instead, they turned to Reed, waiting, watching. Unsure what would happen next, Amari stepped closer. "They asked for you by name," she said. "The ones from other camps. The ones you helped indirectly. They've heard what you did here. They're calling you the Quiet Flame. They want you to lead them." Reed blinked, his voice quiet led. "More," she nodded, "not because of war. Not because of politics, but because they believe you'd never lie to them." Yaira looked up at him with wide, glowing eyes. "What will you say?" Reed turned to the camp behind him, to the children, who no longer looked like orphans, but like builders of something bigger. Something lasting. He thought of how it all started, not with a speech or a fight, but with a bowl of food he never ate. "I'll go where they need me," he said, "but only if they come with me." Sierra smiled, the kind of smile that carried tears behind it. "We will." And so they did. The transport ship lifted into the sky, hours later, full of voices, laughter, and the quiet hum of something new being born. Not just survival, not just peace, but purpose in the stars. They would say his name like a story, like a song, the human who gave up his last meal and became a leader of worlds, not with power, but with kindness,